So let's continue with some of these economic principles that affect value. Next one we see here is conformity. And I will tell you, this is another huge principle to consider. Boy, I see this affect people in a bad way a lot, and it's unfortunate. But there's an old saying that is very true, that you never want to outbuild the neighborhood. You know, I'm telling you, you are throwing away some money when you do that. So, you know, as long as, now if you feel like this is the final place you're going to ever live and I'm never selling the property, then, hey, go for it, I guess. But y'all, if you ever try to sell the property and you've outbuilt the neighborhood, you're going to have issues here. And I've had good friends of mine really get hurt bad because they made a terrible mistake. But here's what we're talking about. You know, if you're in a neighborhood and the average or typical size home is, say, 2,000 to 2,500 square feet, something like that, then you probably don't want to build a 3,000 or 4,000 square foot home, certainly more, in that neighborhood. You're outbuilding the neighborhood. You're not going to get your money back for that. There's a couple of terms you see here that you need to remember for test purposes. And one of those is the term regression. Regression takes place when you've built the larger home. You're larger than everybody else in the neighborhood. You've got more amenities. It's just you just have a much nicer home than anybody in this neighborhood. You're going to suffer from the principle of regression. Those smaller houses around you are going to bring your values down. And we talked about this in the previous hour, but you cannot equate price with value. Just because it cost you $800,000 to build the house does not mean you're going to sell it for that if you're in a neighborhood where the properties are only selling for $300,000 to $400,000. You're going to suffer from regression. That's just a fact, and you want to be careful about this. Now, on the flip side of this coin, if you happen to own the smaller home surrounded by the much larger, nicer homes, then you're actually going to get the benefit of progression, which means it's going to bring, these larger homes are going to bring your value up. Now, obviously, the smaller homes are bringing the value of the larger homes down, but larger homes are bringing the smaller home values up. That's the difference between regression and progression. You'll probably see those terms again. But look, here's where you get the biggest bang for your buck. You have to conform to the neighborhood. In size, in amenities, all the way across the board. You want to conform with what's typical for that neighborhood. Otherwise, you're not going to get the best value, okay? But I will tell you, you certainly don't want to be the biggest, nicest, the baddest, if you will, in the neighborhood, because that's going to hurt. Unless it's just all about ego, I want everybody to know that I got this and I got that and mine's nicer than yours. I'm telling you, that's going to be a very expensive ego. I promise you, you will not get your money back out of this. So be careful with this principle of conformity. In fact, I got to be honest with you. There's been a number of times when I've had homeowners contact me wanting me to list or sell their house, and I just tell them I'm not doing it. You need to call somebody else, because I know it's going to be a headache. I know they've got that home that is out that's overbuilt the neighborhood. And I know from experience, they think because they got $800,000 into it that they should be able to get that or more out of it. And you'd be lucky to get 70% of that back. You're certainly not going to get what you paid for it. So why do I want to inherit that problem? It's not going to sell. I mean, unless you're willing to take a big loss or potentially and most likely a big loss, you're not going to sell. It's just not going to happen. I hate it and I see it all the time. And that is very unfortunate. All right, the next economic principle is the anticipation of value. Now, obviously, you should develop this principle with the more experience you have in real estate. Excuse me, y'all, for sure. But y'all, that's what it sounds like. We have to anticipate value. Y'all, can you anticipate? But it says here it's the present worth of anticipated future benefits. Now you see this used primarily, again, with income producing properties, not necessarily for like residential properties that you're going to occupy and live in yourself. But you anticipate a lot more value here. Maybe it's a rental house. You're going to use it as a rental property. And then based on what you believe you can rent it for versus what you paid to acquire it, then you should be able to anticipate some additional value there potentially. And that's what you're really doing when you buy rental property. It's based on what you anticipate the income to be. Because income, and you'll see when we get into the approaches to value, remember there's 3 approaches. We'll talk about them in a little bit. But one of them is the income approach, where we're actually going to be converting income to value. So if you can anticipate what the income would be, then you should be able to also anticipate the value. All right. The principle of competition, another economic principle. And I will tell you, this is typically not a good thing if you have competition. And obviously, the more competition you have, we kind of consider that to be a ruinous, it can become a ruinous competition. It can hurt everybody. But it works a lot like the supply and demand. Because the more, the more properties you have on the market for sale, that represents competition to you if you decide to sell your house. And the more houses for sale, the lower the prices are going to be. Because everybody is trying to compete with everybody else that's selling their house. And typically everybody wants to sell their house first. Well, if you want your house to sell before these other 6 or 7 around you, how do you do that? Well, you're going to drop your price. That's how you do that. But as soon as you drop your price, guess what what your competition is going to do? They're going to drop their price. They have to. So they're going to drop their price. And some of them may even decide, well, if we're going to drop it, I want to go drop below them. So again, that can be considered ruinous competition. So you want to be careful with that one. And then the last of the economic principles is this principle of plottage. And I will tell you, this one, a lot of people think is backwards in the way we think about it, but hopefully you'll understand it and be okay with it. But anyway, the principle of plottage is where, say you've got 2 parcels of land that are adjacent, that are adjacent to each other, and you own both of them. Well, the principle of plottage assumes that by combining the 2 parcels into one larger parcel, that would create more value. One larger parcel is worth more than if you tried to sell off the 2 parcels separately. Now, and I hear people, especially in a live class, say, well, that is contrary to what I've always heard or believed. You can usually make more money by keeping them separate and selling them off separately, you can actually make more money. Well, in some cases, that's true. But y'all, here's why the principle of plottage exists. Let's say I've got 2 parcels of land here. I'm just going to divide this in half. Y'all, 2 different parcels. Well, say this parcel has 75 feet of road frontage. This parcel also has 75 feet of road frontage. Well, you maybe have a situation where you have zoning laws, you've got covenants, restrictions, and things like that, what you can do, when you can do it, how you can do it. But one of the restrictions in this for this property might be that you must have a minimum of 100 feet of road frontage before you can build a house or any other kind of building on the property. Well, if that's the restriction, then basically all you got here is garden area, because you can't build anything on either one of those 2 parcels. Therefore, if you decide to sell it, you're not going to be able to get much for it, because all the other person would be getting is just additional grass to cut or garden area or something like that. It's just not going to be worth that much. But if I combine the 2, and now I've got 150 feet of frontage, now I have significantly more options on what I can do, which creates much more value. So that's what the principle of plottage is. Again, where we're combining 2 smaller parcels into 1 larger parcel in order to create more value. Okay, there's our economic principles. Now let's take a look at some things that could influence value. Again, appraisers have to consider this kind of stuff. Like social forces in this market or in this area. Things like the marriage rates, birth rates, divorce rates, death rates. Things like that. Will those types of things impact property value? Well, yeah, it certainly can. It may be not so much in some areas, but depending on how these, if any of these numbers get skewed, it can absolutely have an impact on property value. And I might be being a little bit facetious here, but just for example, if you're looking to buy a house in a particular neighborhood and you found that 46% of all the homeowners in this neighborhood died in the last 24 months, does that affect how much you're willing to pay to live in this neighborhood? Yeah, I know I'm being a little bit facetious there, but my point is, if any of these forces, these percentages, these numbers become skewed, kind of get out of line with the typical market, it can absolutely impact property value. Okay? Economic forces. Does the economy have any impact on property value? You bet it does. Can I get if I want to live in this area, can I get a job here? Or if not, how far do I have to commute to find a job? Can I find a job anywhere around here? And if I can, how much does it pay? Obviously these kind of things can absolutely impact property value. You might be thinking, well, I love the house, but I'm going to have to commute one way 30 miles to work. And for me to have to commute 30 miles one way, 60 miles both ways every day, I'm not going to be able to pay as much as if I had a place to work, within 5 to 10 miles or something like that. So the economy has a lot to do with our market. Political forces will also impact property value. What's the government doing or not doing? Maybe we find out that the government is, they've got plans to exercise its right of eminent domain. where we know they're going to be taking some property from this area to do whatever. And well, I would want to, well, what are they going to be doing? And whatever they're doing, will that increase the property value that I'm looking at, or will that hurt my property value? And it could work either way. So those things have to be considered. We have to consider the physical forces. In this area, is this primarily owner-occupied homes, or is this primarily rental properties or tenant-occupied homes? Is this primarily a high-income area, or is this primarily a low-income area? All of those things will impact property value, okay? For good or bad. But you have to consider these when you're trying to figure out what a particular property is worth. So you can't just say or look at just one or two things. There are a lot of things that could impact the overall value of a property. And if you're not going to consider all of them, then you may be missing out on one or two of them that could have a huge positive impact that you didn't consider, or in some cases a big negative impact that you didn't consider. So now you've got a bad number here. Okay? All right. And here we look at these something called market cycles. Obviously value is going to be going up and down, up and down. And that's based on trends. A lot of times you can kind of anticipate what market values are going to do over the next few months based on market trends. Just for example, and what you're really kind of looking at here, now this could fluctuate depending on the market that you're living or working in, but I think for the most part, at least the example I'm about to use is pretty consistent. But one of the things we notice in our market is, usually around springtime, that's when you start to see sales prices start to tick up. Sales prices start going up. Then we get into the summer months, and that's when you sort of see them really, that's when they take off and actually peak out. But then fall comes around, and then you start seeing it start tapering back down. And wintertime, it may actually go down even more. And then springtime, here we go again. It's kind of like a roller coaster ride. Well, what's driving those trends, typically? A major driver of these trends are schools. The schools drive it. Well, why is that? Because again, most buyers, and I get it's not every buyer, but the higher percentage of home buyers tend to be families with kids, small children that are still in school. Well, if that's the case, and if they have the option, most parents would prefer not to move or buy a house and move during the school year. Because now sometimes we can't avoid it, and I get all that, but I'm just saying, typically speaking, if we can hold off buying or moving until the end of the school year, because we really don't want to have to pull our kids out of one school halfway through the year and put them in a new school. Nobody likes that. It's just awkward. It's not fun. Now you got to try to make new friends. It's just, nobody wants to do that. So we try to avoid it if possible. So that's why, during the spring months, we're getting, if school hasn't already let out, getting close to it. So, that's when you start to see more buyers coming into the market, looking to buy. But during the summer months, obviously school is out, that's the peak selling season. That's when you've got the most buyers. But fall comes around, kids are back in school, that's when you start seeing buyers start to leave the market. Prices start coming down and so forth. But anyway, that's just one example of these trends. But the more you practice real estate, the more you're involved in it, you'll start noticing more and more different trends, and now you can really kind of anticipate on how to value property that you might be trying to sell. Okay. And then this, here we're talking about federally related appraisal work. Honestly, I'm not sure why this even matters, to be honest, for real estate agents, for what we're doing here anyway. So let me just tell you sort of what you really need to know. It says some federally regulated real estate transactions do not require an appraisal. Look, typically, if you're borrowing money from the bank to buy a house, most likely, unless you're putting a huge amount of money down, the bank's going to want to get this property appraised. They want to know before they loan the money for you to buy it that the property is worth whatever it is they're getting ready to loan the money for. That's pretty good. That's good business practice, I would think. But the fact of the matter is, there are some federally regulated transactions that do not require an appraisal. And you see some of those listed here. Loans with a value less than $250,000 do not require an appraisal. Now let me say this too. Just because we're talking about some examples of transactions that do not require an appraisal, it doesn't mean they won't still do it or ask for it. It's just they're not required by the government to have it, okay? But just because they're not required by the government to do it does not mean that they won't do it because it's a good business practice. But business loans, less than $1 million, refinancing with the same institution with no advancement of monies. I can kind of understand that one in a lot of cases for sure. Loans insured by the FHA or VA, those are government loans. That's why we're talking about some federally related transactions. And then loans that qualify for Fannie Mae or Freddie Mac, that's the secondary market in the financing industry. In fact, I believe it's the next chapter. We'll actually be getting into, and we'll talk more about those different types of loans and these different mortgage markets like Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac, Ginnie Mae, Sallie Mae. There's a lot of them. So, we'll actually talk about some of those coming up. But look, let me just see if I can't just help you out and come straight to the point here. Apparently they're now wanting to ask you this question. Which of the following federally regulated real estate transaction will not require an appraisal? Obviously any of those we just listed here would be a good answer to that question. However, the one they seem to be more focused on, and one if you can't remember all of them, one I would absolutely remember is that first one you see in bold. Any loans with a value less than $250,000. That tends to be the one they want you to remember and looking for on the exam. Okay, so again, so if you get a question dealing with federally regulated transactions, which one would not require an appraisal? In loans of $250,000 or less. Okie dokie.